Jumbo, welcome. So glad that you are joining us here on Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. Coming to you each week on Thursday on Black Power Media Reloaded at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're so glad and proud and honored to be a part of the Black Power Media Reloaded family. My name is Inez Barron, and I am your co host along with my husband, the bold, the outspoken, the indomitable, the one and only, the unbought and unbossed
Charles Barron. And as I say each and every week, I am humbly honored to be with the stunningly beautiful, the brilliant, the love of my life, my wife of 43 years, Inez Barron.
Thank you. So, we're talking tonight about Cuba, why the Black community must support Cuba. And we've got to fight to end the blockade. And we've got a special guest who will be joining us shortly, none other than Dr. Rosemari Mealy, who's been with us on several occasions and is going to be talking about that topic. But first, we believe that as African people, we need to make sure that we call the ancestors, those who have sacrificed, those who have gone before, and who have paved the way to bring us to this point, that we want to call them to offer a libation to them and have them be a part of this ceremony. So we do have a video that we'll share with you at this time.
Without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors, we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They
Oh, thank you so much. So, as we say, our ancestors have paved the way and brought us to the point, and we have an obligation to acknowledge them. We stand on their shoulders, and we are committed to carrying the torch forward as we go forward. We do want to also have a video brief presentation that we want to share with you, which explains a little bit about Operation Power, what we stand for, what we've done, and what our objectives are. So that's a brief video that we're going to share with you at this time. I'm going to call on our engineer to do that.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation Power was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation Power understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Thank you so much. And we also want to call your attention to just about 5 books that we want to highlight to add to your library if you don't already have them. And the first one up is Speaking Truth to Power. And it's a collection of articles and essays that Charles Barron has written over many, many years. The second one is called It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. And it is both a primer about what capitalism is and a very astute analysis of what's going on at the present time. The third book we want to recommend is a part of a trilogy, and it is a novel, and it's called Black Rising, and it is written by Kevin Barron, and we have a second one in the series called Black Rising, Home and Abroad, the second part of the trilogy, also by Kevin Barron. And the third in the trilogy is called The Threat. The third trilogy novel is called The Threat, once again written by Kevin Barron. All of these books are available online at Barnes & Noble, and we do encourage you to check them out. Check them out. Lots of valuable information in them. Well, our topic today is why the Black community should support Cuba and the blockade. And we've got a very capable, experienced guest with us today, joining us in the person of Dr. Rosemari Mealy. Charles?
And this is an emergency session. Cuba is under threat. As you know, the American empire is declining. The American dollar is declining. And so America is moving more toward gunboat diplomacy because the dollar diplomacy is simply not working. The threats of other countries moving away from the IMF and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the rise of the Sahel Revolution in West Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and the rise of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 20 other countries now are saying, hell with the IMF, the World Bank, the dollar, the World Trade Organization, and we no longer fear in America. So in response, America attacked, kidnapped the President Maduro and his wife Cecilia and brought it to the American dungeons. In reaction to that, America has sent troops into Nigeria. Nigeria has a neo-colonial puppet government that's probably allowing that. And also they bombed supposedly terrorist posts in Nigeria that they created. And so America and Donald Trump is on the decline. So now Cuba. Now they're coming after Cuba. They've been after Cuba since the revolution in 1959. And since they lost the Bay of Pigs, an embarrassing military defeat, and they've been blockading Cuba and threatening Cuba, now they focus it on the oil. The latest is a focus on the oil. They've been confiscating, bombing ships that were leaving Venezuela, and they knew Venezuela supplied oil to Cuba, and so to China and to Russia. And they're not doing it with the dollar. They're doing the yuan from what is it? The yuan from China's currency, and then the ruble from Russia. So they're no longer using the dollar. And this is happening all over the world. So now they're picking on Cuba again. And this is why we're in a state of emergency in Cuba. Long lines for oil now. Sometimes it takes weeks to get any, and at night the lights go out. So, but we have a guest who can deal with that one way better than us, and we're honored to have her on all the time. And Inez will bring on our guest.
Thank you so much. Well, we have a special guest. It is Dr. Rosemari Mealy. She is a veteran Black Panther. She is a professor in the CUNY system, CUNY standing for the City a former professor of CUNY, CUNY standing for the City University of New York. She's an activist, educator. She's involved in the arts. She's outspoken. She's an organizer, and she is bold and unafraid. And we're so pleased that she's joining us to bring her expertise to share with us on this issue.
And extremely important, she's the author of Fidel and Malcolm X, Memories of a Great Meeting.
Yes.
Welcome.
And the wife of Dr. Sam Anderson as well.
Right, he's in another room. He helped us out here.
Right.
Good evening, Sister Inez, and pre-happy birthday.
Thank you.
Brother Charles, thank you so much, and to the engineer who's putting this all together, and to the audience. Yes, it's an SOS. That's what we're up against, brothers and sisters, right now. In relationship to Cuba, we've been on nonstop for the past week or so, especially, and even before then, with raising the alarm, not just nationally, not just internationally, but trying to raise the alarm here in the United States. And one of the things that Cuba has asked us was, at this point, put out information, go to social media, respond to all the statements, and these are like international statements. Go to Facebook, whatever networks that you have, repeat, send out information, because the situation is very serious. Because today, the president of Cuba rolled out the rationing plans, and those rationing plans, it is in response to the fuel block supply. So that's how serious the situation is in the country. But at the same time, Cuba is alive. I mean, people are still traveling there. Brother Paul Coates from Black Classic Press, which, by the way, published our book. Yeah. He has a delegation of Black publishers and writers going to Cuba next week. And so people are still traveling. Trump has not blocked yet the airplanes. There's like three airlines that travel there from the U.S. They're still traveling. So one of the things we put at the top of this list in this SOS is to you can travel to Cuba. You can go there under the purvey of a law called Support for the Cuban People. Support for the Cuban People. You can travel there. You can get a delegation together. And one of the travel agencies that's so good about helping to organize this is called Altruvistas, ALTRUVISTAS. They can set up a Support for the Cuban People delegation for you. So I just want to put that at the top. But tonight I'm supposed to talk about why should we Black folk be even interested in this? What do we have to do with Cuba? Well, number one, I like to say we have three pillars that we can stand on and refer to when we say why we should be responding to Cuba. Number one, it's a historical connection. That transatlantic slave trade that you've learned so much about through these programmings, they were a part of that. Those slave ships stopped off our people in Cuba, in Latin America, right? And even even here at the slave markets, our brothers and sisters were sold into slavery to produce the sugarcane, which was the backbone of the capitalist economy for Cuba and much of the so-called New World. So we have to maintain that connection. And this is Black History Month. This is a great time to link our relationship to Cuba, to our Afro-Cuban brothers and sisters. And they make no bones about it, acknowledging and accepting their Africanness, Afro-descendants. That's what they say that we are. And that is so powerful that the Cuban government, contrary to what goes on here, has a national program that's run by the government. You know, it's called the Aponte program. And that with the Aponte program, you find throughout Cuba, brothers and sisters organized and mobilized, reclaiming their Africanness, reclaiming their dress. The culture is already there, but you know what colonialism does. Colonialism makes you think that if you are lighter skinned and if you can get your hair curled up, you're not African. But I tell you that there's groups of sisters, they're called Afro-feministas, having a sense of who they are as Black women of African descent, organizing events, organizing conferences, coming here to the UN last year at the special session on Afro-descendants. So they know their history. They know their history. They know that they are African. So that's like the first pillow. I mean, even way back, you know, and I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about the history, but we've got to frame the history, you know, so that we can refer to it. And we use that history then to affirm why we must support Cuba. So let me just give you, I don't know if you know this, but Frederick Douglass, during the period of the Spanish fights to maintain Cuba, control of Cuba, Douglass said to young Black folk, we have to organize contingents to go to Cuba and to fight in that war to liberate Cuba. Martin Delany, even before then, there's all that history that even, believe it or not, even at Tuskegee Institute, our brother would bring Cuban men and women to study at Tuskegee, right? But not so much now. You know, they would study them to become maids and servants, but at least that kind of interaction was very important, that when those Cubans went back, they had a sense of who they were. And when I say we would not support that, they were studying how to become good maids and servants so they could go back and be good maids and servants to the white Cubans. But that aside, that interaction was very, very important. And then, of course, we then jump into what can Cuba share, you know, and then I after just talking about what can Cuba share, in that response to Trump's, so what we call it, he's calling it a fact sheet. We call it a lie sheet, right? Mm-hmm. If you look down at that sheet of everything that he's saying, that Cuba is a threat to the United States of America, I mean, that Cuba is a failed state. I just want to throw out a few examples of how we can counter that lie. Okay. Did you know that the life expectancy in Cuba is 76.33%, and in the United States it's 73.68? 76 for Cuba, a country that's still facing a United States blockade for more than 60 years. Did you know that the unemployment rate in Cuba is 1.39%? And here, I mean, they're just juggling facts and figures. We don't really even know what it is now, but we know that a whole bunch of Black folks got laid off with Elon Musk, with his little strategy of destroying the government. And we know that many of them were Black women. So just another example, the homelessness. More than 700,000 people in this country are homeless, and it's probably more by now. In Cuba, it's near zero. Now, the housing may not be fancy like ours, because you still have that blockade and they're not able to do a lot of repairs because they can't get resources in. But imagine near zero. Okay. And I tell no lies, as Amilcar Cabral would tell us. He taught us, you don't tell lies to claim any easy victories. But these sources that I'm quoting to you are coming from none other than the World Bank. Okay. The World Bank. And then when we talk about healthcare and education, life, debt, healthcare, and education in this country, In Cuba, we got to pay. Here, we got to pay for it. We don't even know if we're going to get it tomorrow, given what's happening in Congress today. The Senate can't come up with any kind of deals. Free health care and education. Free health care and education, despite the fact that there's a blockade and yet they can't get in resources, they can't get in medical cares, they can't get in medical supplies and what have you. And then the thousands and thousands of doctors that Cuba has trained all globally, all over the world. And out of that, we have more than 200 brothers and sisters who have graduated from the Elam Medical School, and they have returned to this country, and they don't have any debt. They have no debt. And then the thousands of Cuban doctors that have been trained from Central America, from the Caribbean, and from Africa, from the whole world. It's really starting out with Algeria way back in the 70s, right? Interesting enough, what the United States government did most recently under the purvey of little Rubio, who went to the Caribbean, they have now placed most of the Caribbean nations under control and stepping on their backs by demanding that they not send any more students to Cuba to study medicine. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? So that means our Caribbean brothers and sisters are going to die, right? Literally will die because there's no they're not coming up with an alternative, no alternative, the same way that they're sending our brothers and sisters who are being deported to the Caribbean. They're not coming up with any kind of resources to help our brothers and sisters to provide care for those brothers and sisters who are being deported. I mean, from all parts of the world, and they're ending up in the countries that they're now bullying, telling them, if you don't accept these brothers and sisters that you are deporting, then your visas are going to be taken away. This country is so evil and so vile, and the foundation of that, as we keep saying, is capitalism. Let me just go back to a couple of more of these stats that we're using now to talk about Trump's lies that he's calling a fact sheet. He's calling the fact sheet. The homicide rate in this country, I mean, the stats say it's 5.0, but I know it's higher than that. In Cuba, it's 4.4. Malnutrition here, 0.9. In Cuba, 0.32. And you'll love this one. Billionaires in this country now, probably 800-900 or more. In Cuba, there aren't any billionaires. Right? There aren't any billionaires. So, foreign intervention now is that is the strategy. That is the strategy for moving into countries and stealing their wealth. And we saw that as a case in point in what happened with the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela. And Trump said, Cuba, watch out, Colombia, watch out, Cuba, you're going to be next. Right? And they knew that Cuba relied on Venezuela for oil, right? And so now there's no oil going into Cuba from Venezuela. And then Cuba has, and people talk, oh, it's blackouts. The equipment, that it's amazing how their technology has been able to retool those old energy plants and what have you that were really back from the early part of the 70s and the 80s, right? So the blackouts, yes, every day. 2 hours in the morning, in some places, 2 hours in the afternoon. The whole idea, brothers and sisters, it may not be direct intervention through military, because they know that even with their advanced technology, they wouldn't get any. They would talk about boots on the ground. It would be pulling boots out of pulling boots out. Okay, so what the strategy is to use what we call economic genocide against the country. So you don't have any fuel. What does that mean? Cars can't run, like our brother said earlier. The lines are extending. You don't have any fuel. You can't cook, right? You have no fuel. You have no electricity. So the idea is to push this to the point where either you starve the people, right, and you end up watching on television what we did for the past 4 years or more, what happened in Gaza, right? But I can assure you, it's not going to happen in Cuba, because the Cuban people are so resilient. I mean, here's the president today putting into effect and letting the people know that at times are going to be hard. He did not say that you're not going to have anything. He did say there's going to be rationings. We will have to cut back on things, but he did not say you're not going to eat, you know? And so that is the situation. And that's speaking not in any, you know, not using any fancy words or anything like that, but this is a crisis. This is for us and Black people. We have experienced this, you know, and that's another reason why we know what racism is about. We know what this country does. We know what it's doing to us. You know, it's even killing white folk, you know. I mean, without impunity. I mean, it's out of control. The empire is crumbling. And when the empire starts crumbling, or it's at the point of crumbling, it has to find new ways to suck and leech. And so what it's doing now, it's doing that to Africa. It's doing that to the Caribbean. And because Cuba has stood up against this empire, it stood up against it. It has to crush it, right? It doesn't want to see life. It doesn't want to see our young people grow up. It doesn't want to see free education. It wants to see us starving. It wants to, because that's the cruelty. That is the cruelty of the highest level of imperialism, manufactures cruelty, right? And so that's what we're seeing.
Dr. Mealy, you talked about the resilience of the people and how they support their country. I guess it reminds us of when they had similar kinds of situations, and they called it the special period, as I recall, letting the people know we're in a crisis situation, but we're going to come through this. We're not going to be crushed by this, and we're going to continue to stand together and fight for our independence in those ways that are going to help to keep us sound mind and not destabilize the people by trying to undermine their support for the government. And someone in the comments also made reference to the fact that Cuba, remember, supported our sister Assata Shakur. They protected her. They made sure that her life was safe and secure. And that was a part of their support for the mission and the work of the liberation people here in New York, in the metropolitan American areas.
And I would like to say that Inez and I personally went to Cuba. And when we went to the medical school, to our shock and amazement, when I was talking to the students, 2 students said, "Hi, Councilman Barron." They were from East New York. 2 students from East New York got full tuition paid for in Cuba. Full tuition, came back to our community,
yes, they did.
And they're serving us. Talk a little bit about how much Cuba, Fidel was an international revolutionary.
Right.
He said that Africa must be free, the Caribbean must be free, Latin America must be free. I went to Grenada. The Cuban soldiers were building the Grenadian airport. They were building the airport for Grenada and Maurice Bishop's revolution. Doctors, engineers, all over Africa, all over the Caribbean. Talk a little bit about that in terms of Africa.
Yeah, their internationalism is unparalleled, you know, and a lot. I'll save the most, I guess, the best for last. Okay. Let's start at the point where, you know, doctors and nurses and educators going to Africa right after the struggle against colonialism, going to Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Congo, Brazzaville, and South Africa, Angola. All of those countries benefited by doctors and nurses, technicians, as they were edging out of a colonial situation and developing their nations. And Cubans were there to support them and helping to build, not and then not returning with their gold or natural resources, but coming back, because internationalism is it's a part of the whole process, the whole part of what Che Guevara called the new man and new woman, because what happens is a new consciousness is created within the minds of the individual, right? And that's a very important concept that we don't have here because we're so individualistic, right? Cuba's internationalism is not it's not acts of charity. You know, it's like it's a part of the humanity of the world to give and to share without expecting anything in return. And that's why it's so important right now that we respond. I think the ultimate, before we go there, there's one other couple that was so important that also prior to Asata and some of the other brothers and sisters who went to Cuba, Robert Williams and his wife Mabel, they, you know, I mean, they had to get out of Dodge fast, right? And so they ended up in Cuba and they had a radio program called Radio Dixie, where they broadcasted all over the southern part of the United States. And this infuriated folks here because it was like the powerhouse. It was like Operation Power, you know, was able to broadcast and people would get the truth about what was going on in the world. So that's another, we rarely do mention them, but that was another power couple too, like you two. So that was good. Now, in terms of Africa, I think the ultimate was when Cuba airlifted, brothers and sisters, the majority of its military force to Africa to defend our brothers and sisters at a battle that was called the Battle of Quito Quanival in Angola. And this battle was a decisive battle because what it did, it forced the South African government under Botha and the apartheid system, it forced them to the negotiating table, right? And in forcing them to the negotiating table, our great hero, Nelson Mandela, was freed. And that, to me, and when Fidel, we had an opportunity to be with Fidel when he explained that battle and how they put the nation, you know, their nation was put into peril, but they believed that they were going to win, and they did. And so that is a very important, I mean, you cannot give that up. And that's why right now we're looking to see what the African nations, South Africa has already stepped up. We're looking to see what Angola will do because it has oil and it was importing oil to Cuba. We have to look and see. We have to wait and see. But the time is now to see who the friends are, right? Who are our friends and what do we remember? So I think that battle, we have to, the Cubans' children know about that. And the other thing that's so beautiful, when you go to Cuba and any delegation, you go to a center called Karabuni, which means welcoming in Swahili. And this center is actually run by, believe this, sisters and brothers who fought in Angola. And they're elderly like we are. And they're one of them, a couple of them actually were the bearers of an artillery unit. And they are able to share that with the children. And the brother, one of the other brothers is from Ethiopia, and he talks about what it was like being an internationalist there. So you have this live history, and it's like grandma telling you what it was like then. But grandma's still alive now to encourage you to carry on. And these children love to hear these stories about their, you know, their heroines. Can you imagine? So that's like so beautiful because the history there is so intact. It's intact with the music, the dance, everybody. Like I said, you know, you have community centers, but the community centers always have spaces for the children. And that's why when we go, we take art supplies, we take medical supplies, we take as much as we can take on the planes and what have you. And then there are shipments and what have you that are going to. So, and this, you know, we just came back with a group of 18 people, an intergenerational group of brothers and sisters. And it was, you know, we took something like 500 pounds of material aid. And, you know, and because you, as I'd say, you travel under this licensing called Support for the Cuban People. And it was also the anniversary of the Cuban Institute for Friendship with the People, which actually was started by Fidel, that it's a space that welcomes people from all over the world. So here we are now in 2026. So Black folk need to step up to the plate. We have to, because, I'll never forget, Sister Viola Plummer used to tell us about the slogan, when Africa called, Cuba answered, right?
That's right.
Cuba is calling Black folk now, and we have to answer. So what are some of the things that we can do basically? It's just so basic. Going to the phone, and believe it or not, going to the phone and picking up your phone and calling your congressperson and your Senate. I mean, I'm getting these. I've been doing this, and then you write them, and you get the letters back, and you can respond to them. That's important, because they need to know that despite what's going on and what's going on in the Senate, in the House, it's like, they are being beheaded, really. But if they can hear from their constituents that, hey, we're not, you have to do something, right? And there are Sister Ayanna Presley, for example, out of Massachusetts, powerful sister speaking. Those of us right here in New York, call our sister, and you know who she is, our Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Go to her office. Let Yvette know. And look, do not let Meeks off the hook.
That's right.
Because he is in charge, Foreign Service, right?
That's right.
He knows. Go to Meeks' office. We have to let these people know that they cannot be silent. They cannot be silent. If they are silent, they're being complicit with the potential of economic genocide against Black folk and people in Cuba. You've already been complicit around what's happening in Gaza.
That's right.
So it's time to speak up. It's time to speak up. And that's around Africa as well. So we're calling on you. Then there's two places right now that we're telling people that they should contact to sign off on demands. And one, please put this down. It's called the Alliance for Cuba, right? They have a sheet where you can actually contact them and you can sign off. So go to ACERE, ACERE.org, ACERE.org, and it will pop up that you will be able to fill out the form, and you don't even have to call them. It'll go directly to them. So that's something you can do tonight. It's an action alert, and that's to ACERE, ACERE.org. Then there's another organization that's also pushing for people to contact their elected officials. It's called the actionnetwork.org, actionnetwork.org. And I've been able to get a group of kids, just to let their parents know about this so that they can tomorrow contact the actionnetwork.org. And what I like about that is in reading what the actionnetwork.org is saying, that we cannot be silent and allow children and families used as negotiating tools, as targets, because that's what they're trying to do, So Cuba has said, we'll talk to the U.S., but they're not making concessions. They're not going to do that. They're a sovereign nation. They have a right to exist. And you're not going to come in here and cart off our president at night and kill hundreds of people. Because if you cut off one head in Cuba, another one rises. Because that's the way their system is structured. As a socialist system, it's led by a communist party and a military. So you think that you can kill one? It doesn't work that way. Capitalism works that way. The system in this country works that way. And Charles can tell you, but there you cannot cut off the head of one without another one rising. The leadership will always emerge. And right now, the United States cannot look at anybody, they cannot identify anybody who's going to be opposition, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You know, I wanted to say real quick, and I'm gonna let Inez get a piece in there. While we going after Meeks and Yvette Clark, go after Zoran Mamdani. Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, the pseudo-socialist, said that Cuba and Venezuela were dictatorships.
That's
And
right.
that Chanel and Maduro were oppressive leaders. This is a so-called socialist. We should say to Zoran, what do you have to say now that your man Trump is coming after Cuba? And if you can fight Trump around other issues, then you must now fight Trump against Cuba. So all of you who are in New York City, write a letter to Zoran Mamdani. We're going to do that on behalf of Operation Power and say that we need you to speak truth to power by calling it for what it is. This is Donald Trump's attempt to go back to the Monroe Doctrine.
That's right.
Control over that area and its resources. Zoran, don't be a hypocrite. Inez?
Thank you. Dr. Rosemari, as you talked about the aid that Cuba gave to Africa, let's also remember, for those of us living in the United States, Cuba offered aid to the United States when Katrina catastrophe happened and people were starving and not being able to get assistance. Cuba offered aid, the United States rejected it, as if that they were able to handle the crisis. And we know that thousands of people died in that catastrophe. And so talk to us a little also about what the blockade says, what it is that we're talking about, what's happening to Cuba, and the fact that now the United States is trying to also prevent other nations from giving aid to Cuba.
Right. Okay, so our people need to know that the way in which the law operates, the law operates in relationship to Cuba under something called the Helms-Burton Law. And this law was signed off by Bill Clinton, but there were little pieces of it prior to 62, 63, but Clinton signed off on the Helms-Burton bill. And technically what this is, it's a law that has an extraterritorial nature also. It's a law that says that no country, if a country attempts to trade with Cuba, then it cannot trade with the United States, right? So it's dictating to other countries, sovereign nations, how it should function. And one of the ways over the past 30 years, more or less, is that countries have spoken out against that at the United Nations, because every year countries voted that the United States should lift the blockade. This has been the place where that voice in opposition to Helms-Burton has always shown up. But then there's another caveat now, because when Trump, just before a president can sign off, executive orders, there is a section of Helms-Burton that the president has the leniency or has the right that it can create executive orders. And within Helms-Burton, there's an element that allows the president to lift certain aspects of the law. And that's what Obama did when he reestablished ties with Cuba, right? But it's an executive order. So, executive orders, they can be taken away, they can be given, and they can be taken away. So subsequently, when each president comes into office, that president can undo what the previous president has done. Okay, now we were in a good situation with with Biden, right? And we had massive movements all over the US. People stepped up to the plate, telling Biden to lift the blockade, okay, and to remove Cuba now from what is called the state sponsor of terrorism list, which is a double whammy in a sense, because in addition to the Helms-Burton, now you also have the addition now of this state sponsored terrorism list, and that makes it even hard. No country wants to trade with you if you are on the state sponsors of terrorism list, right? So Biden removed Cuba from that list the day before he went out of office.
Hmm.
And then immediately after, when Trump came back, he instituted that in addition to adding more.
Mm.
And then we have what we have today. So that means that these draconian measures are legal. You know, they're legal in the sense. We even have coming up a case at the end of this, near the end of this month, where Exxon is actually suing the National Cuban Oil Company for property that they say that they're trafficking in, right? So Helms-Burton allows descendants who left Cuba 50 years ago. And by the way, when those properties were nationalized, many of those companies, Cuba offered to pay back, you know, those companies, and some did not accept. So now everybody is coming after Cuba, and we're going to be watching this case with Exxon, because the same it was fast tracked to the Supreme Court. We're going to watch, because if you notice, Trump kept talking about how Venezuela owes us.
Yes.
For that oil. They owe us. They owe us. And so it's interesting that that will be one of the same arguments that Exxon will then say that Cuba owes us for nationalizing its own property, you know, manifest.
Yeah, that's like Haiti owes France for being free.
Yes.
And now Haiti owes France reparations. You know, this kind of backward thinking. Let me ask you this in terms of BRICS. You know, I know for those who don't know what BRICS is, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, along with, they're up to about 20 other countries, including Cuba and Burkina Faso and others, decided that they're no longer going to be enslaved by the IMF and the World Bank, and they're going to do their own currency. And a lot of those nations are supportive of Cuba, but Cuba's still trying to develop their relationship with BRICS. So one of the great hopes for international solidarity is through BRICS and through the Sahel region and Burkina Faso.
Right. And we're in a volatile situation here where BRICS, as one of the ambassadors to Cuba told me the other day, it says it's still a work in progress. Because the political situation is shifting so quickly in terms of Trump going after many of those countries that are in BRICS, right? And then you have other countries who are in BRICS that are in alignment with the U.S. government too. You know, so I could Saudi Arabia, for example. So I could see where right now it's a great idea, and I'm sure that it will evolve. But at this point, we have to wait and see, you know, and he's right. He says it's a work, it's like a work in progress.
Really. Yeah, real work in progress. Matter of fact, it certainly isn't no coalition made in heaven, because you know,
but it would be
the idea is correct, you know, with Russia, China, India, and India still dealing with the dollar. So there's a lot of conflicts and contradictions, but the potential. Right. I know they're working on a new currency called the unit, and the threat of tariffs on these countries.
That's exactly what I was going to say, you know.
Tariffs, but listen to this. These countries represent 4.5 billion people, 55% of the 8 billion people in the world. America represents 340 million people. So you are going to put tariffs on products that 4.5 billion people have in their hands for 340 million Americans. Even he is backing away from tariffs. The people around him saying it's not making any sense. So I think there's a lot of potential in BRICS, but like you said, it's a work in progress because there's a lot of conflicts and contradictions.
And that tariff issue, you know, the way you lay it out is correct, because I mean, the first thing that Trump did was he slapped the tariffs on the 3 countries that were trading oil with Cuba, right?
Right.
Mexico, right? Mexico says that it's reviewing, you know. What does that mean? Any country now that would want to, that's the other thing that I'm saying, the stifling process of trying to move the country into economic genocide. We just got to call it what it is, right? But this is, again, where the history of solidarity of Black folk in Cuba comes into play, and so I know we only have a little minute left, but I just want to encourage people to consider taking delegations to Cuba. When you know that there are groups that are going, then you should really, the National Network on Cuba is another organization that's doing a lot of work, because it's the umbrella organization for all of the Cuba solidarity groups in the country. It is also in the process through its legislative committee, encouraging people that if beyond New York, but if your city passed a resolution calling for an end to the blockade and removing Cuba from the state sponsors of terrorism list, it's now important to go back to those city councils and tell them, we now need you to lift this up now, and you need to pass a new resolution, right? And New York City is in a good position because it has a resolution that's stuck in committee. So that's another thing that people can do, is to push our new council to, I mean, it's symbolic, but across all over the country, trade unions and what have you have passed these resolutions, and that's been our organizing tool for people, for our communities. So we encourage people to do that. And then the last thing is church organizations. You can take medicine to Cuba. You can go under the religious category. I encourage church groups and church organizations to align yourself with particularly the United Methodists, the Progressive Baptists, because Cuba there's another link. There's a Martin Luther King Center in Havana that is accepting donations and material aid, humanitarian aid from organizations right now. Cuba needs you to step up with your church organizations and start having your ministers to start preaching about the fallacy of imperialism and capitalism, and start talking about socialism and how Jesus himself was a revolutionary, if we really believe that, right?
Martin Luther King was a socialist. In his latter years, he went from "I have a dream" to "my dream is a nightmare now, and I am a revolutionary." Well, before we close out, I do want to say this, that I did speak to Gail Brewer, who is one of the council members who's putting the new resolution in. She is committed to that, and we're honored to say that we ushered in the original resolution and got it passed on the books. She's putting it in again, and she said she'll work with us, to make it happen. But I cannot let you leave without talking about your book, that great meeting with Fidel and Malcolm X. We have about a good 5 minutes left, so go for it, Dr.
Okay, this is the other thing that brought Black folk, that solidified our relationship to Cuba. It was Malcolm meeting Fidel on the 19th of September, 1960, for 10 days in Harlem, right? And at that meeting, when the Cuban delegation arrived on the heels of the revolution and they came into New York, they were looked upon as jibaros, with fatigues on, they weren't really legit, right? They tried to get a room in the hotel in downtown Manhattan, the Shelburne, near the Cuban mission to the UN. They were told they would have to pay $20,000 or more, exorbitant. Fidel said, no way, we are not staying here. And he threatened to set up tents on the grounds of the United Nations. And in the book, Fidel and Malcolm X, Memories of a Meeting, there's a whole story of what happened, because we had an opportunity to speak to Fidel about the visit. He told us firsthand. We spoke to the journalists about what it was like. Juan Almeida, the Black general, everybody just came out, and then Malcolm played a key role in gathering people for that meeting. And Malcolm said to Fidel, you have done everything in your country that we are still struggling to do. And Fidel And Malcolm warned Fidel about the devil, right? He warned him, you know, and it was a Fidel said that when we met with him in 1990, he said, you know, I was just so sorry that I was never able to have him come to Cuba. But of course, he was assassinated. And so, brothers and sisters, if no more, when Cuba is calling African Americans, Black folk, African descent from the diaspora, we must respond now. We must respond now, because Malcolm would want us to do that. You know, we're going to commemorate the anniversary of his death. And these are moments that we have to reflect on this international solidarity that he engaged with. And this is, by the way, the centennial of Fidel's birth. And so all over the world, people are going to be commemorating that. In Cuba, they already started. We need to have more programs to do that, to link the two of them together. Mm-hmm. These are some of our greatest leaders, you know, and so we pay homage to them. They are our ancestors. And if we don't step forward, our ancestors are going to, you think our ancestors are angry at us now? Mm-hmm. I don't want to see the wrath that would come down if we don't begin to deal with this fascism that we are engaged in right now. And you don't have to be in the streets all the time. There's other things that you can do. You know, you can do it from home. You can have bake sales. You can talk to the young people. We have, as Asata said, we have to pass it on. You know, that's our responsibility. So I leave tonight saying that it's a lot of work. You'll be hearing a lot of us reaching out to you. And I really want to thank you and Inez for giving us an opportunity to really talk about this issue. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow, I think we're going to be back on another program with another brother who just got back from Cuba.
Tell him his name.
Oh, Brother James Count Early will be. He's in Brazil right now. He just hopped off from Cuba on Sunday. Now he's in Brazil, talking about the impact of the Trump era on Black folk in this country, sharing that with our Brazilian brothers and sisters, who, by the way, they fought against fascism in Brazil, right? Remember Bolsonaro, friend of Trump's best friend, tried to blackmail the leader of Brazil, right? Tried to blackmail him. And I mean, this man is always talking about deals. We got to deal him out. Oh, by the way, deal him out. That's a good
we
got to deal him out.
We want to thank you, Dr. Rosemari Mealy, that we are so blessed and honored to have you as one of our leaders. And I was talking to you earlier, and you were letting me know how much the Cuban people really appreciated you. I think on one of your birthday celebrations, everywhere you went, they had a cake.
I had so many cakes on December 28th. It was just amazing. You know?
Appreciation, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of you out there, I know we got to talk about our oppression. We got to talk about what Trump is doing, but there is an irreversible demolition of the American empire. They are not winning. We're in the belly of a wounded beast. So they have to create an illusion of invincibility. But if you can't beat a small island like Cuba with all of your technology for 60 years, blockades, threatening the world, and I look on television, I see President Chanel with 1 million Cubans in the street.
Yes.
We will all die first before we let you come in and take over Cuba. Yes, they're resilient, but they're also revolutionary in spirit. The monster is dying. Yes, we're going to feel more pain, but his demise is irreversible. You're seeing the imploding of the Republican and Democratic Party. They're fighting each other. Yes, BRICS is contradictions, but it's rising up and trying something. Sahel, they're bringing troops into Nigeria to try to scare the Sahel folk and deal with Nigeria's oil and gas, because they have a neo-colonial black puppet government. So I want all of y'all to read Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism by Kwame Nkrumah, and we are winning. I know this sounds crazy to you. You may not be able to see it and feel it, but we are winning. We're suffering from the birth pains of a dying empire. The Roman Empire fell. The British Empire fell. The Ottoman Empire fell. And the American Empire is irreversibly fallen, and nobody could revive it because no form of our oppression is permanent. It's temporary.
Thank you.
May I just say, my 20-year-old granddaughter told me yesterday, Abuela, having hope is resistance.
There you go.
That's right. Thank
Good
you
way
so
to
much,
end it.
Dr. Mealy. And we join you when you said Cuba, sí.
And
Cuba.
bloqueo, no.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Abajo el bloqueo.
All right, now
Thank you.
abolish the blockade. And we say to all of you, as we say every week, we thank you for joining us. But every week we say, the truth shall set you free, and power is the great equalizer. Black power.